Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. And tonight, we're bringing five authors with a bunch of new releases to stack up that to-be-read pile. And as always, during the holidays, books make great gifts. So let's find out who is bringing in the new stuff. So, Kindle, you are up first.
Hi, I'm Kindle Alexander, and I write gay romance. And I have to tell y'all, I didn't tell you this before, but um, I'm probably not good to be on this panel because I did not finish my new release like I thought I was going to during this time. So I'm going to be talking about all of y'all's books coming up.
It'll be here in 2 weeks.
It'll be here in 2 weeks, so 3 weeks. I didn't get it finished. I tried so hard.
It'll be fun.
It just didn't happen. It's that biker.
Beth, how about you?
Hi, I'm Beth Dolgner. I write paranormal fiction and nonfiction, and my current series is the Eternal Rest Bed and Breakfast Paranormal Cozy Mysteries.
Layla?
Hi, I'm Layla. I write LGBTQ fiction and romance, some paranormal, some biker boys, some rocker boys. The book that I'm here with tonight is actually an MMA themed harem book.
Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim Fielding. I write gay romance in I think all the genres and science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And I'm balancing out Kindle because I had 4 releases this month, but I'm going to focus on I know it's insane, and I didn't do it on purpose, but I'm going to focus on my most recent one, which is a Hanukkah story with fairies. It's called Ash Believes the Impossible.
Patrick?
And I'm Patrick Thomas. I write fantasy, science fiction, horror, paranormal mystery, and an advice column where people write in and ask Cthulhu for advice. As Patrick T. Phibbs, I write books for kids, picture books up to YA.
So, Kindle, let's talk a little bit about the book that will be coming soon. What's kind of the world we're going to step into for this one?
Well, it is part of the Tattoo and Tides series, and it is about the men of the Disciples of Havoc Motorcycle Club. And one of them is a real fucker. Don't I get a bell or something when I do it? No, one of them is I thought there'd be like a surprise and celebration. I pulled it off really early. He is a very difficult man to write, and I just don't understand how the fictional men inside your head can be so difficult. Like, I know that the men that I'm talking to face are difficult, but how do the fictional ones inside your head become so difficult? Well, and he required a rewrite, so it's not here yet, but maybe January. But he's got a love, and his love is by way of a special double agent for the DEA. What a great pairing.
And he comes
1%
with
Motorcycle
handcuffs.
Club, deputy DEA agent.
So, Beth, what world are we going to step into with you this time?
Book 7 of my Eternal Rest Bed and Breakfast series just came out on December 1st. It's called Quiet Nights, and I was really excited to get this one out to readers because every book in the series is a standalone murder mystery, but I have a storyline that started in book 1 that finally wraps up in book 7, and so readers have been asking me, like, what's going to happen and what's going on with this character and what's going on, and so it's nice to finally give them all of the answers that they've been asking for. And I was excited, but I was also a little nervous because I was like, oh, I hope everybody's okay with the resolution that I give and all the answers that I give. But so far, so good. People seem pretty satisfied with the way I tied up that storyline.
Layla?
Well, this is a murder for Crow. This is only the proof, but I was able to get a copy of it. It just came out on the last day in November, and it is literally kicks off on the day that Crowley Davis retires from the MMA world, and he's kind of forced into retirement. So it's all those feelings and angst of, what do I do now? I'm, get up in the morning. I'm not training for a fight. I'm not getting ready to go back in the cage. So he takes off for Vermont, which is just a place I love and went to college in, and decided that I had to write about again. And while he's up there, he meets an author. And so we got our first 2 M's, except there's a little snafu because along the way he picks up a hitchhiker. So now we're at 3 M's already. And our 4th one is a little bit of a surprise and comes in late in the book. But he's the reason that this is now a trilogy. I'm working on book 2 already, and they are actually going to run their own gym. They are going to do some really neat things in the new town that they're living in. And I just had a lot of fun writing these characters and their peers, their friends that are also either retired or retired during the book.
Kim, what are you bringing to us? What world are we stepping into this time?
World, Portland, Oregon. It's a novella, so
a fantasy world. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. I grew up there. It's definitely a fantasy world. So there's the cover because it's really pretty, but I don't have a print copy since it's a novella. But it's a Hanukkah story, and I think there aren't enough Hanukkah stories, and there especially aren't enough fantasy paranormal Hanukkah stories. So this is a Hanukkah story with fairies in Portland. So we've got sort of an ordinary guy who's gone through a breakup, and it's winter, it's dreary, he's not feeling the holiday spirit, and then he discovers that the forest in back of his house is enchanted, and he's got a secret admirer back there who's a fairy. And so they strike up a friendship, but there's also, of course, there's a crisis coming, and I like to ground things in a little bit of reality. The crisis is relating to the healthcare crisis and the cost of housing in Portland. So he's got to save the bridge to fairydom, basically.
Because of cheap rent.
There's no cheap rent in Portland. I don't think so.
Oh, I meant ferry.
I was going to say Fairyland.
Exactly. Yeah, it could be. Yeah.
So, Patrick, how about you? What world are we going to drop into this time?
Well, this is my first time on Hot Off the Press, and I've had, like Kim, I've had 4 books, so I'm just going to put a couple by the screen, and then I'll have to pick one. As Patrick T. Phibbs, I did of course, the camera's working, On Top of a Yeti, which is to the tune of On Top of Spaghetti, except it's an eyeball instead of a meatball that they're chasing around. John French and I edited the 2nd book in Agents of the Abyss, Staring into the Abyss. And then I have, as Patrick T. Phibbs, my first YA, which is Emotional Support Nightmare, which is a story about a teenage queen of darkness summoning a nightmare to help her. And he has to deal with, is he going to help her out, or is she going to kill him? And or are they going to become friends? And then the book that just came out today, the day of the filming, is the 2nd book in the Bikini Jones series. I got to really learn to focus on the background. Bikini Jones versus the Sea Monsters. Bikini Jones is a over-the-top fantasy sci-fi world where anything and everything is possible. Bikini was cursed as a teenager to forever wear a bikini. So, as so often happens in these cases, she saves the world on a semi-regular basis. I can get into more details about that later. And she has to deal with a cult of sea monsters trying to summon Dagon Jr.
So let's talk a little bit more about some of the folks we're going to get to meet and hang out with in these stories. So, Beth, like you say, this is book 7. Tell us a little bit about who, the regulars that we're going to be seeing and spending time with, as well as whoever else might be new.
Yeah, we're going to be hanging out with Emily Buchanan. She is the woman who owns Eternal Rest Bed and Breakfast. And actually, the storyline that wraps up is finding out what really happened in her husband's fatal car crash a couple of years before book 1. So his ghost is actually making a couple of appearances in this book. But we also have Emily's best friend, Sage, who's a psychic medium. And Sage's storyline has been quite fun because she currently has lost her ability to communicate with spirits. And she realizes that when you're sitting in a seance and there's knocking on the walls and weird things happening, it's kind of scary when you're just a normal human being who doesn't know what's really going on. So there's laughter, there's murder, there's a little bit of tears, maybe if you're attached to some of the characters. So it's kind of a roller coaster as far as any of the books in the 7. This is probably the most emotional ride that my readers are going to go on.
Is there going to be a book 8?
Yes, there is, but not just yet, because after this, now that I've wrapped up this storyline about Emily's late husband, I am going to be starting a new series early next year. So I'm going to do that before I dive into the next Eternal Rest book.
Layla, what world do we get to fall into with our MMA fighters?
Well,
Or who all do we get to fall into, I guess, is the better question.
Well, Crow is the main character. He's really the catalyst for the story, and it is an injury that's retired him, and it's something that he's been concealing. So part of him leaving is also so he doesn't have to tell his friends and his former, group that he trained with what's going on with him. But along the way, he rolls into this town, and lo and behold, he's wanting to get some food, and the one diner in town is on fire. The owner has had a little bit of an accident. I used to waitress, so that scene is actually literally based on showing up to work one day and finding that there is no longer any work because it is burned to the ground. So he's, hitchhiking out of town now, trying to find another place to go, and Crow picks him up. And they wind up riding out to Vermont together, where Jalen, our author, who writes nonfiction, he's actually, it's kind of a mix of fiction and nonfiction that he does, because he's focusing on the train wrecks of Vermont, which there were just some spectacular train wrecks in the early days of the railroad in Vermont, and a lot of those sites are haunted. So he's weaving his nonfiction research with his paranormal to create these stories. And now he's got these 2 tenants who have just he was expecting one, he got 2, and he falls for both. And our little surprise shows up later in the form of Jesse, and he's going to be fun to introduce because he and Crawley have known each other for a long time, but it's fun watching him get to know the other 2.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Oh, sure.
I've started this book. I have this on my Kindle. And I think one of the things that I loved about it, I haven't gotten very far, but it's third person, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You wrote it in third person, and I really like that. And you write about this head injury from his mixed martial arts, but he's had several and concussions. Is that correct?
Yes.
And
spoiler alerts.
And when okay, yeah, that is a spoiler alert, but I think it's in the description too, isn't it?
Or it is, yes.
Maybe not, because I'm usually drawn to things like that. But with those injuries, did you research that? Did you have to go into that world to learn about that?
The fun of it is I'm a second-degree black belt. I've been practicing Taekwondo since I was 18 years old, and I have had a couple of head injuries just in training practice. So it wasn't a far leap to get into their world. I've cross-trained with jiu-jitsu and other things that are in the book. So the techniques that they're using and all the things in there, I worked out with prior to putting them in the book to make sure that just those descriptions were accurate and things like that. Even there is a spoiler alert leg break that comes later. And not only is it accurate, it's taken directly from several videos from MMA. So it is a very clean way of breaking a limb there.
I bet that's going to be exciting. This book is very well written.
Thank you.
It's I'm not far. It takes me a little bit of time these days to read, but I have enjoyed what I read so far. Okay, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
So Kim, let's talk a little bit more. Who do we get to meet as we dive into the land of Hanukkah Fairy?
Hanukkah Fairies, as we do. There's so our main guy's his name's Asher Kaufman, and he's a very a very average guy. He's 30. He's got a job. He works for an employment agency that finds jobs for people who might be, who might be otherwise hard to place for various reasons. And he's, I often write people who are kind of angsty and have these dark and troubled pasts. He's not. I mean, he's trying really hard to be grouchy at the beginning of the story, but he's not really succeeding as well as he thinks he is. And he's got these. He broke up with his boyfriend about 7 months ago, so he's kind of spending the holidays alone. He is living upstairs in a duplex, and he starts getting these mysterious gifts, things like a basket with pine cones in it and a hand-woven scarf. And eventually he ends up meeting the other character, whose name is Claytonia, and whose name, by the way, is a plot giveaway. So if you want to Google it, you can. But Clay is a fairy who lives in fairyland, and the woods beyond are sort of a gateway to fairyland. And he helps Ash believe. Ash doesn't have a lot of. He's not a pessimist, but he doesn't have a lot of imagination. Maybe he doesn't. He's a realist, and Clay helps him see beyond that. To believe the impossible, to believe that anything is possible if you. So it's a nice kind of holiday miracle sort of message there.
So while we're on it, what about a couple of these other releases you've got coming out? Since you're releasing like 27 books over 3 days.
At least, yeah. So to keep in the holiday spirit, I have an audiobook out that's based on Dracula, because I think that's totally in the holiday spirit, and because I'm always in that sort of holiday spirit. It's called Farkas, and it is I just basically took Dracula and put it in 1950s LA, so it has a very noir tone to it, and Joe Leslie is the narrator and did just a fabulous job. So we've got a lawyer, an LA lawyer, who gets sent off to this mysterious mansion to help the mysterious guy who lives there settle his effects, and of course he's a vampire. So I have a law degree, so I made some lawyer jokes that I'm very proud of in that one. So that's that one. I've got, let's see, the third one just came out also. It's another holiday tale. That one's a Christmas tale called Dog Days of December. It's very fluffy. It's like whipped cream. It's a tale about a couple of middle-aged guys who meet in a small town over Christmas over dogs. One of them rescues a dog, and that's how he meets the other guy. And then finally, the fourth one is called Chambered. It's the 10th book in my Bureau series. So it's a paranormal detective thing. It takes place in 2022, and we've got a detective with the Bureau of Transspecies Affairs who is sent to get rid of a poltergeist in a house in Sacramento. Only once he gets there, he discovers it is not a poltergeist, it's another kind of spirit. And if he evicts the spirit, he's going to kill him. And so he has to come up with a solution to save the spirit. And you can read it as a standalone, but also it's got a couple of surprises that sort of forward the plot of the entire series that were a lot of fun. So I think that's 4. That's good.
So Patrick, let's grab a couple of yours. Who are we going to be meeting? Who are we going to be hanging out with? And where would you like to start?
Why don't we start with the Bikini Jones? Let's see if I can put it close to my face. There we go. This originally started as a series. A friend of mine, Dan Horn, did a painting where a woman is with a giant monster and she's in a bikini. And in fantasy and album cover art and anime and comic books, there's always women dressed in costumes that really have no practical value, but yet they're fighting dragons and aliens and monsters. And why would they wear a bikini, even if it is chainmail? I came up with the idea of because she has no other choice. Bikini Jones, when she was 16, was sunbathing in her backyard, and her pervy neighbor came over and watched her through a knothole, and his wife came out, caught him, gets upset with Bikini instead of with her husband, instead of blaming the guy who's actually doing the bad stuff. And because she's a witch, she puts a curse on her, so she has to wear a bikini. So if she takes it off, another one appears. She puts clothes on over it, they disappear. And Her real name is Mary Sue. So she, of course, is proficient in martial arts, has 5 doctorate degrees, plus she passed the bar, which is technically a doctorate, but she doesn't count in her doctorates. And, she has been to Atlantis and outer space. And in this one, while we have characters coming from the first book where she helped reform a group of themed villains called the Tommy Gunners, who were Prohibition era style gangsters, but old school, like Batman, Adam West Batman villains, where they didn't kill anybody, they just robbed. And she gets them out of crime and stakes them for opening a themed restaurant in Manhattan. So we open with the grand opening of that, where the mayor's there, Dr. Dendrite, who is a evil scientist reformed, who has his brain inside of a dog so he can get to know his daughter better. But she doesn't know it's him, and his ex-wife certainly doesn't know it's him. The mayor on the way out gets attacked by a shark woman. Bikini has to come to the rescue, but turns out the shark person is upset about bad things that are happening to the shark people. And as the book goes on, it just keeps escalating and escalating. We find out that the cult from Lovecraft's Shadows over Innsmouth has branches, and one of them has become a televangelist. And as these cults are so off to do. And
please tell me it's also an MLM. I mean, that's just.
Well, I suppose it could be. But it's, like I said, it's just a lot of fun. It's bizarre. It's funny, but it takes itself seriously. So it has, it's not too campy. Everyone in the world believes they're in their world and takes it quite seriously. And it's just been a lot of fun. This is the second book, the third book. Oh, and in this book, we introduce her cousin Cthulhu Jones, who is the son of Cthulhu, which I won't even get into much of that. So like I said, it's just over the top, just keep going, and it's a lot of fun.
So Kindle, tell us a little bit more about who we're going to be hanging out when the book comes out. You're on mute.
I'm sorry, because I'm looking you guys up as you guys are talking, because these panels are fascinating to me. And you pull out such great information. But I'm looking at James P. Nettles' typewriter book right now.
That would not.
Is that you?
Yeah, the business book. Yeah, that would be me.
That's what is that book about?
We'll talk
The
about that
business
offline.
of essential for writers.
Yes, it's a business book for writers. It's how the business works.
Okay, I never knew that, and I've looked for you before. I never knew that.
Just one of the me's, but that's the me that writes nonfiction stuff instead of the fiction me.
The fiction you. Okay, I'm going to turn away from that because I have questions in my head.
So tell us a little bit more about who we're going to be meeting when the book finally comes out the door. Who are we going to be hanging out with in the back?
This is the third in the series, the Tattoo and Tie series that I talked about earlier. And we're going to meet Devin Fox, and we're going to explore more of his life as the second to the throne of the Disciples of Havoc Motorcycle Club. Fully entrenched, a young man. He's been in the club his whole life because his father is president, and it's not, quite the allure that it used to be. But when you're so far stuck in the club, that's your whole life. And as I normally write, his counterpart is his complete opposite. So trying to find the ways of weaving them together in a very difficult and dangerous situation. It's what the story's about. It'll be a 2-book story. It'll be a duet. That Tattoo and Ties is a series of duets that started with Havoc and I don't know, Order, Havoc and Order. That's what it's about.
Let's dive a little bit deeper. Now, one of the most fun parts of writing, of course, is I didn't expect things to take that path. Now, without being too spoilerly, so Layla, as you were kind of working on the story, is there something that is you were working through it, you all of a sudden you discovered, you learned, you took that weird turn at Albuquerque, you ran over Bugs Bunny, what was the thing as you were going through this that kind of brought up the factor?
And actually, there was never supposed to be a hitchhiker. It was supposed to be the whole close proximity of Crow getting up to the cabin he rented and him being out there with his neighbor, the author, who's at the next cabin and who owns the property. And, as winter came along, those two were supposed to get to know one another better. And then all of a sudden in like chapter 2, there's this hitchhiker out of nowhere. So he was the first kind of, oh, wow. Okay. Well, I have to keep him because he really wants to be part of the story and he just fits so well. But then I was also working on my surprise character, my Jesse, the other MMA fighter. And the more that I learned about him, the more that I started to change some of the thoughts that I'd had for the book, because he was really meant to fit in there with them too. And it was like each one was a puzzle piece. And when you put them together, you got something beautiful. But if you left a piece out, it was just incomplete and they didn't quite fit. So I didn't set out to write a harem book per se. I set out to write, kind of with just the two, with the angsty, broody characters, and the author's kind of broody himself. And lo and behold, I ended up with 2 extra characters, all of their buddies. They're going to run an MMA school at this point in book 2, and I may end up actually doing my first 2 female characters, because I have a female MMA trainer coming up to work with some of the girls who want to fight. So that's going to be exciting there to do that.
So does this mean you're going to be opening up a school for the MMA fighters?
Oh, me personally? No. But in the story, definitely. They're going to have fun with it, and I'm going to have fun working with some of the guys that I know that really train and do tournaments and things. Getting their perspectives, especially when it comes to the sparring and the fighting aspect. I'm getting up there in age. I don't like to spar anymore.
Yeah, things take a lot longer to heal than they used to.
They really do. Once you get past mid-40s, it's like, I don't want to be kicked in the head anymore. No, thank you. I'll take a pass and watch somebody else do that for the sidelines. I'll be a judge.
There's a reason I judge heavy athletics. I teach people how to do stupid things. I don't. I do fewer stupid things now. So, Kim, out of the variety of stories you're bringing, where was the thing that when you were working on it? If you got a couple, that's fine too. But where was the thing that when you were working on it, you were like, okay.
I think for Ash Believes the Impossible, I knew I had fairies, and I didn't really think too much about the backstory on fairies. I mean, they're just fairies. And as I was writing it, the fairy queen becomes a character, and she was a lot of fun to write. She's got a lot of power. She is basically a chaotic neutral, and she's got a lot of power. And she basically cares about herself and doesn't, so sometimes she does good and sometimes not, and she's got rules, but she created Clay and some of his fellow fairies, and the process she created them from and how she created them, just it made me smile. I think it's a new idea, or a fairly new idea. It just made me smile, and I can't give it away because it's a spoiler. But it was just one of the, sometimes, you're writing and you just come up with this idea and it just tickles you, you just amuse yourself. You hope everybody else is as amused as you are over it. So I'm really happy that was just one of those things that came to me. The other thing is just actually a very happy coincidence, because in the story there's a snowfall. Portland doesn't get a lot of snow, and it's kind of a big deal when it does, and it's part of the story because it's kind of a cool snowfall. My younger daughter's going to college up in Portland, and just Sunday it snowed. Not a lot, but it was, the big pretty flakes. And she sent me a video, and she lives in this gorgeous old dorm that's like 100 years old, and she's up on the 3rd floor. So she sent me a video of these giant snowflakes falling on rooftops, and I promptly stole it from her and put it up as promo because the timing was just perfect. And it was like, thank you to my kid, the weather gods, the fairies, whoever sent me that snow. It was just perfect.
You got to take the timing when it comes.
Exactly.
How about you, Patrick? As you were working on stuff, what was the fun turn this time that you didn't expect?
I think in Emotional Support Nightmare, it was just how well a 10-tentacle purple creature from the dream realms actually could get along with a teenage girl, and how well he kind of fit in with everything, and how he ended up being the Watson, so to speak, where he's the narrator of the story, and just some of the things that he leads to get done when and the way I'm trying to do it without giving a spoiler away. Just
that's the sneaky part.
Yes, just some of the things that he manages to do that help move the story along in a different way than it was originally intended. Helped out very well. But like I said, it's not often you get a buddy book with such divergent people.
So, Kindle, so far as you're trying to rewrite your bikers, what's the surprise that's come out of the club so far?
For me, I'm like many. The spoiler alerts are real, but the book has turned more serious, and I don't want to get off on this topic at all. But what I have found in my world is I've done quite a bit of research, and I generally do quite a bit of research into the characters' jobs to try to get authentic. And that double agent and the department that he works in, that is very real. And I always thought that was a conspiracy theory, but it is a very real and fascinating world. And that's all I'm saying.
Undercover goes dark.
Undercover goes, you know what? It goes a little dark.
Beth, how about you? And I have to ask, was the surprise ending there that wraps up at least the book 7 and the grand husband's death mystery, was that planned all along, or was that the big surprise?
No, it was not planned all along. I wrote book 1 setting up the mystery of his death with no idea how I was going to resolve it. So luckily I chose the right path to bring about that end. I think the surprise for me on this one, I feel like over the course of 7 books, I've gotten to know my characters pretty well, at least the ones, who are recurring in every book. And one of them, who was only supposed to be in book 1, and then maybe, every now and then maybe Emily would run into him in town or something like that, but he wasn't supposed to be an integral part of the stories. He has very much become one of the main players in my books, and he gave up a couple of big secrets in this book that I was not expecting. It was kind of like, oh, he's a lot deeper and has a lot more going on than I had realized. So I think that's fun when you get a chance to discover things about your own characters that take you by surprise. I mean, that's always a nice feeling. Makes them feel so much more interesting and so much more in depth. So I was happy to see him giving up some insight into what makes him tick.
So now I'm going to ask the other side of that question, the research rabbit holes, because, and this is all Kindle's fault, this is the bonus question. Because one of my favorite parts about being a writer, and always has been, is it's a great excuse to go research the odd, the unusual, the questionable, the choices that you're like, it's a good thing I didn't actually do that. Or maybe that's just me. So, Kim, when you think about any of the multitude of works, the grand tomes that are coming out this month, what's the one thing that you were doing research on that you kind of fell down that research rabbit hole?
That's a rough question because I fall down research rabbit holes. So, I'm an academic for the day job. So, they're like black holes. They pull me in. One of them that pulled me in, actually surprisingly for Ash, was the true story behind Hanukkah. I mean, my family celebrates Hanukkah, and I know sort of the Sunday school story, but the actual historical story, of course, is not quite what you get in the Sunday school, and it's not. It turns out that there was probably a struggle between more fundamentalist thinking people and less fundamentalist thinking people. So for me, finding out sort of the historical aspect of the story was really interesting. And so that was one thing. And another thing that really pulled me down for Chambered, I was looking into all the different kinds of house spirits. I mean, you think about all the kinds of things that can haunt houses, and I knew a few of them, but so many cultures have a house spirit of one kind or another, and so they have some things in common, and some of them are really diverse. And there are a lot of house spirits, and it makes me wonder why we don't all have spirits in our house of one kind or another, because it seems like we're lacking if we don't, because there's just so many to choose from. And some of them are helpful and some of them are harmful, and some of them it depends how you treat them. And so that was really fun, just learning about how many options there are if you want a house spirit. So I hope I get the good ones, the ones who the ones who do all your chores for you, and they don't really want any rewards, and if you talk about them too much, they go away. So that's a good kind.
I'm just looking for the ones that clean house.
Exactly.
Even though the new puppy we have looks just like Dobby and has a definitive, whole thing about loving socks. So Patrick, what research rabbit hole did you fall down?
One of them is just how certain offices in law enforcement work. I had made one of my characters commissioner of police in New York City, and it turns out I did not understand the job of commissioner. Not realize I'm assuming it was just the top ranking cop somehow over the chief of police, and it's actually a civilian office. They have no arrest powers. So apparently I just had no idea what, Commissioner Gordon was actually, I guess my idea of commissioner was based on Commissioner Gordon, and he is not your typical commissioner. You shouldn't be going out on calls and arresting people and flashing a badge. That's not the job. So it was all easily fixed when everything was said and done by making him police chief, who is a police officer. But it was just one of those things where I'm like, and found out a little bit more about police hierarchy, and then I was planning to know.
Kendall? So what research rabbit holes have you fallen down beyond discovering that there really is undercover cops?
There are really undercover cops, but I'm going to go back a book if it's okay. A couple of books. One of the best, probably one of the top tier moments of my life was the time frame that I researched Painted on My Heart, because I went into the world of HIV, and some of my very best friends today have come from that world. All the people inside that are helping those with HIV, and then the people that live with HIV every day and have been for a very, very long time. And it's so rewarding to first learn about the disease, and then all of the strides. That's the great thing about research, is how far we've come in every situation, and where the hope is and where the hope is going, and how many people are hopeful, and really in all the situations that you've researched, because that hope always springs forward. And that's been a great thing to learn about. But I do want to add that my house spirit is failing Kim, And I think there needs to be a reckoning come, and maybe you could send someone to replace my feeble old house spirit. They're not doing a really great job. Okay, I'm done.
Beth might have one she can loan you.
That's what I need. That's what I
You've been
need.
quiet
Beth.
lately. So Kindle's was very warm and fuzzy. Mine's kind of on the opposite end of that. So let me preface this with, I write murder mysteries, which means my search history is probably on some government institution's list somewhere for the things that I research. But I really fell down a rabbit hole researching the way I killed off my murder victim in this book, because I had the idea and I was like, well, I've heard that works as a way, you know, to I don't want to give any spoilers, but I'd heard it worked, but I was like, is that an urban legend or is that a real thing? Turns out it's a real thing, but a little more complex than I realized. And so I just fell down this rabbit hole of reading historical accounts of people who have encountered this method of bad things happening. So it was very interesting. I wound up learning quite a bit of history. Yeah, it was great fun. But again, I'm sure my Google search history is questionable as all get out. So if my husband precedes me in death, I might have somebody knocking on the door to ask me a few questions.
Just a handy reminder. Always keep business cards that say horror and murder writer. Just, you know, so that way when you're
Hello,
sitting,
officer, here's my latest murder mystery.
that's a good one. And number two, if you do bump your husband off, don't use the way you wrote in the book. Just two quick hints for you.
That's good advice. Yeah.
You do it somehow, do it another way. Layla.
Well, the big rabbit hole was really digging into the railway accidents. When I lived in Vermont, the college that I went to had a railroad track that ran just off campus. And we used to like to go out there and just walk along the track down into the, there's a town next to ours that had a little waterfall and you could sit out there. And so when I started writing about Vermont again, I started pulling on those memories. And I was like, I remember our campus was said to be haunted, and there's all kinds of, they've done all kinds of shows out there at the campus. And I remember them talking about the railroad tracks nearby being haunted. And I'm like, okay, well, where do these haunted places, what happened to lead to these spots to be being declared haunted? And so then I started coming across railroad crash after railroad crash after railroad crash. And that was really my rabbit hole. And that's how I came up with what Jalen was writing about, because I didn't really have a topic for him until I fell down the rabbit hole of these railroad accidents. And I mean, some of them have got some really neat urban legends behind, that they've seen the conductor out there with the lantern, and people have claimed to see different things on these sites, especially at different times of the year. So I really researched not only the real incidents that took place, but the paranormal activity that's happened in those areas afterwards to put together his research for his stories.
See, it's all the fun rabbit holes we get to fall down. Well, guys, I think we've given everybody plenty of info to start diving into those to be read piles. But before we get out of here, let's make sure that everybody knows where to find you and all those good books, website, social media, all that kind of good stuff. And because there's no adult in the room, I'm still going to go in order. So, Kindle, you're up first.
Thank you for having me tonight. It's really been a great panel. You do such a great job. I'm Kindle Alexander, and I spell that like the Amazon Kindle, Kindle, Alexander.com. And I'm everywhere under that name, everywhere that you can find. But find me. That's all I have to say. It's find me.
Beth?
Yeah, you can find all of my books on Amazon, available in Kindle, Kindle Unlimited, and paperback. My books are also in audiobook, And a good starting point for me is probably just my website, which is bethdolgner.com, Dolgner, extra points if you spell it right the first try. And yeah, there's links there to all of my social media and all of my book pages.
Layla?
I'm everywhere on social media too, Facebook, Instagram. I do TikTok video trailers for some of my stuff. I have a Wix website that you can find me on. All of my books are now in Kindle Unlimited. This is a very new thing for me, as well as being on Kindle and in paperback. And thank you so much for having me. This has been a blast.
Kim?
So I'm Kay Fielding Writes over social media. So I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, Mastodon. I haven't quite figured that one out yet. And my website is kfieldingwrites.com. The newest books are mostly out on an ebook. A couple of them are available in Kindle Unlimited, and Farkas you can find at Audible and Amazon.
Patrick?
You can find me at patthomas.net. I'm on social media as well, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you can also find my kid stuff at patricktfibs.com.
And I have had the pleasure tonight of trying to herd these chickens and cats. All about the holiday season, and I'm Jim Nettles at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the Speculative Fiction Academy, and of course, here at ConTinual, because they never let me out of my little cave. Everybody, we'll see you soon. Go stack up those to-be-read piles.